The letter was placed inside the Hall of Flame with honor, and a wax cylinder recorded with nothing but the crackle of a real candle was sent to Orvain that very night. They entered a sealed chamber. The lights went out. The candle was lit. For the first time in 40 years, Viren saw his own shadow and wept. But in the corners where people didn't yet understand the flame's message, questions still flickered. What is so special about a candle? Why do they protect fire like treasure? What is the flame really saying? The answer, as always, was hidden in the wick. For those who had made the journey to Elderwood, the answer to those questions echoed in their bones. It was a journey Rivi herself had made many times, bringing pilgrims from all over the world to her secluded home. They were known as Wickwalkers pilgrims, who journeyed across distant landscapes, carrying a single lit candle. Their goal is to deliver stillness to places drowning in rush. No technology, no speed, only silence, stories, and a flame that never flickered. Each journey lasted exactly 7 days. And by the end, something always changed, not just in the place they visited, but in the hearts of the people they met. But these days, she wasn't so much teaching them the ways of the flame as she was remembering them. These days, she often felt the weight of the flame resting on her shoulders alone. So she started looking for others to share the load. In the southern desert of Miranora, a small group of travelers formed a new tradition. Far away in the bright empire of Galdor Prime, a king named Viren ruled over a city that had banned night entirely. After that night, King Viren changed his laws. He did not ban light, but he invited night back into the city. But across the sea, in a valley beyond the Red Mountains, flamekeepers discovered the ruins of an ancient learning place, a school that existed even before Elderwood. As the centuries spun by, new traditions spun from the teachings at Elderwood. Some were grand, some were small. Ember births. As time passed, a new celebration emerged. Ember birth, not a religious or national holiday, but a personal ritual. One night, Rivi was tending her fire when a letter arrived, burned around the edges but intact. Across the world, the ember of intention continued to glow. Then one day, someone stepped into River's shop. Indeed, it was important. Rivi spent her days showing people how to make fire, but her nights were spent rediscovering what fire taught her. Inside, they could watch recorded videos of flamekeepers sharing stories and songs. One evening, a young man named Alaric found the still house. He returned to the fire and decided to light his own candle. He reached for a match, then stopped. There was no need to hurry. The next morning, he woke to the smell of wood smoke and sunshine. Years passed, decades passed, centuries passed. Fire spread to every corner of the world. The world had changed, yes. But it had also come home. It had come home to itself. It had come home to fire. And somewhere in the stillness, Rivi watched the world change. She didn't fight the current anymore. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a flame. Oh, how that flame had traveled. From mountaintop caves to the deepest underground tunnels. From whispering forests to cities that once feared the dark, it had moved gently, steadily, like breath itself. But there was one place it hadn't yet reached. It's not a country, not a fortress, not a building. It was within. It's light in their shoes, light in their hair, light in their water, but no heat. They lived without shadows, without friction, without rest. A young glassworker named Tano felt it first. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't cry. All he could do was watch the sun set and sunrise, day after day, year after year, knowing nothing else. A boy approached hesitantly. "Are you the one?" he asked. "The one who breathes fire," she replied, smiling. "I am." The boy sat with her for hours, mesmerized, as she told stories about dragons and deserts, about sacrifices and stars, about devotion and death, about pain and passion. And when she finished, he could feel fire under his skin. They were played with wood and breath and silence between notes. They felt something old, something powerful, something long forgotten, slowly awaken inside their chests. She told him how the song had made her feel like coming home, like returning to herself. She said it awakened something she didn't know was missing. He smiled, took her hand and said, "It wasn't you who was missing. It was the fire within you." Listening to your own heartbeat in silence, standing barefoot on stone and remembering warmth without stimulus, writing letters to one's younger self by candlelight. And at the end of the course, students didn't graduate with certificates. Along the way, she visited places important to her journey, places that had helped her find the fire within. First, she went to the lantern schools where she'd learned the names of constellations. Then to the caves of silence, where she'd learned the sound of her own heartbeat. She thought about the elder who'd requested a fire funeral, the musicians who wove songs of the soul, the scholars who taught heart-centered classes, the weavers who breathed stories into embers, the glass worker who rediscovered warmth, the nameless elder who prophesied it all. She smiled and whispered, "We're not done yet. Story's not over. The fire's still here, and it's in us." Next to the spark temples, where she'd watched others ignite their passions. Finally to the stone hearths, where she'd felt the warmth of community. And at each stop, she sat, closed her eyes, and tried to feel the fire. If it was there, she moved on. If not, she lit a candle. They simply lit a candle, looked into it, and said, "I know you now." People recognized her from the stories and flocked to her side, asking for advice, sharing their experiences, lighting candles together. By the time she reached the city center, her small flame had become a beacon. When she entered the Grand Plaza, the crowd parted, a hush fell. And when she raised her candle, thousands of sparks ignited. That day, people said they saw Elric return, not as a prophet or a princess, but as themselves. And now that you found it, you can keep it burning. They placed their hand gently over their heart and bowed slightly, as if to say, "I see your flame, and I honor it." And when people left one another, they didn't say goodbye. They said, "Stay warm." The fire remains, because it was never in the wax. It was in you. And thus, people no longer feared forgetting, because fire no longer lived in tools or temples. It lived in their bones. And when the music ended, when the last ember faded, they didn't clap or stomp. They sighed. Each ember song was written to mimic the rise and fall of a flame. Some lasted for minutes. Others lasted for hours. And in some cities, entire concerts were held in dark halls, lit only by firelight, no speakers, no microphones. It's just pure human glow. They danced to them. They meditated to them. They worked to them. They fell in love to them. They conceived children to them. It became a sanctuary for seekers, a haven for the curious, a refuge for the lost. And one of the most popular courses they taught was internal fire, reclaiming the burn within. It wasn't a class about fire safety or first aid. It was a class about fire feeling. And soon, it seemed as though every human heart was beating to the rhythm of ember music, every breath echoing the melody of a flame. "Does it feel like you have embers in your bones?" she asked. The boy nodded, unsure how to explain it. "Well, then you have the fire too," she said, beaming. "And maybe, just maybe, you can breathe it." She'd lived through the transition from oil lamps to electric lights. She'd seen the best and worst of both. And as she lay on her deathbed, she spoke to her family. "For my funeral," she said, "I want no lights, only fire and silence." They honored her request. 10,000 people stood around her pyre. No speakers, no speeches, only the sound of the wind. And when the flame rose, people didn't cheer. They breathed. They felt something old, vast, and gentle stir in their chests. Some said the smoke carried her soul. Others said she became fire itself. Then one day, he found a package on his windowsill. Inside, a matchstick, a candle stub, and a note. "You are not made of glass." They didn't perform for attention. They did it to remind people what it meant to be alive. Now, in quiet corners of parks and alleyways, a new generation emerged. But they didn't breathe fire from their mouths. They told stories so fierce and beautiful that people claimed to feel fire under their skin just by listening. And always, at the end of their tale, they would whisper, "If your spine tingled, that's your flame returning. You are made of embers." He stared at it all night. Then, as morning broke, he struck the match. They traveled from hearth to hearth, reigniting something primal, something profound. They spoke to kings and paupers, scholars and street sweepers, lovers and lunatics, dreamers and doers, mothers and martyrs. They told them tales of heroism and horror, of hope and hurt, of joy and jealousy, of peace and pain. And afterward, people walked away feeling changed. Changed because the fire had jumped from the storyteller to their soul. Changed because the weaver had breathed life into their embers. And for the first time in his life, he felt something. Inside the heart of the human being. The fire had been carried for generations, but now it needed to be felt. Not on skin, not in sight, but in the bones. Long ago, before even Elric, an unnamed elder spoke a prophecy around a desert fire. There will come a time when men forget not just the fire, but the feeling of warmth. The world will be bright but cold, it's fast but hollow, and the only thing that will save them is a flame lit inside their ribs. No one understood what she meant, till now. And in a floating city called Miralux, where everything was made of transparent crystal and glass, the people had light from every direction. Across the world, in a forgotten corner of an antique shop, a grizzled old man stirred from his nap. Something new had been lit. Across the land, whispers began circulating. Something was happening, something elemental, a change of seasons in the soul, a rumble in the belly, about the energy beneath their feet, about the beat of their hearts. And then they realized, what we've been missing isn't light. What we've been missing is fire. Stirring in the blood. The air crackled with anticipation. Then one day someone asked, "What do you feel?" And for the first time, people started talking about the hum in their veins. That same day, in a quiet corner of a park, a woman sat in a circle of stones. In ancient days, there were performers called fire breathers, those who exhaled fire not just from oil and spark, but from deep inside their lungs and memory. Soon, those ember weavers became known throughout the land, from the mountains to the meadows, from the valleys to the villages, from the cities to the seas. Fire music musicians across the world began composing new forms of music called ember songs. They weren't loud, they weren't digital, and during those performances, people didn't just listen. Afterward, a young woman named Zari visited the musician who'd composed her favorite piece. Soon, more and more people sought out these songs. Later still, in a humble corner of a bustling city, a group of scholars established the Quiet Flame Institute. Exercises included holding one's breath beside a candle and learning to match its flicker. Years passed, and in the city of Braylon, a great elder died. Then one day, a few months later, Rivi walked along a path from her homeland to the capital. As she neared the capital, the crowds grew. Later still, as the movement spread and grew, a new greeting emerged. People no longer shook hands or said hello. One evening, Rivi sat by her window watching the sunset. 8. Many years later, at the end of the flame scrolls, the final page fluttered open to reveal a single line in Ashar, "When the wick is gone." Hello, friends. The wind had always been the enemy of the flame. It could snuff out even the bravest candle. It could scatter warmth. It could erase history in a single breath. But now, something had changed. The flame was no longer afraid of the wind. Because people had learned something powerful. The flame doesn't die in the wind, it dances, and when the flame danced, the world watched. And Veros was special because in its high hills the wind howled like hungry wolves. Nothing stayed lit for more than seconds. And so people stopped believing in fire. Matches were considered children's toys, candles, a myth, and silence, dangerous. For if no one spoke, the wind would find its voice in the silence, and it would scream. Open structures designed to let air flow through, guiding flame instead of silencing it. Inside, candles spun in spirals. Lanterns hung from silk strings and swayed with the breeze. He took a single soul flame in a jar to the summit. Everyone told him it was impossible. But Doro wasn't trying to prove anything. He just wanted to ask a question. He sat at the top, unlit candle in hand, and whispered to the sky inside. She saw the name Elric. She didn't know him, but she had lost someone once too. And suddenly, 2 names became 3. If the wind is strong enough to carry prayers, will it carry this flame? She needed to start at the beginning. She carried no scrolls, no gear. Only a lantern with her original flame. The wind howled. It tore at her robe. It pulled at her hair. All across the world, people were learning to live with the wind, but she didn't shield the flame. She opened the lantern door. They didn't expect replies. They just wanted to be heard. These wind letters contained apologies, never spoken dreams, never voiced questions, never dared. And as the lanterns floated into the skies, flames glowing gently within, people said, "Let the wind carry this where it must." Some wind letters disappeared forever. Others landed in distant towns, bringing strangers together through shared grief, shared memory, shared light. She searched for him for years, eventually finding him tending his family's flock of sheep. Only a lantern with her original flame. The wind howled, tore at her robe, pulled at her hair. But she didn't shield the flame. She opened the lantern door. When people lit a candle, they remembered her name. When the flame danced with the wind, they whispered a prayer for Doru. It read, "The wind asked the flame, 'How do you survive me?' The flame replied, 'I don't survive you. I trust you.'" And below that, one small note,